Okay. And of course, because I got kicked off the one, it stopped my screen sharing. So let me go back to sharing. Okay. Yes. So all 12 tones are equidistant. That's why we call it equal temperament. And what that allows us to do is play on the same instrument in every key without having to retune. Because remember, with those older tuning systems, what would happen is you would sound good in one or two closely related keys, but if you tried to do anything beyond that, you would just sound terribly out of tune. So with the invention of equal temperament, keyboard technology now becomes suddenly capable of moving through the cycle of fifth progressions and putting an emphasis on the 5-1 relationship. That becomes crucial in the Baroque period because we've entered the common practice period. We've entered the period where functional harmony, where everything needs to relate back to the tonic, governs phrase structure. So Bach is a big fan of this new tuning system since it allows so much more to be done from the keyboardist's point of view and from the composer's point of view. So what he does is write this kind of magnum opus where he takes us through every single key in a prelude and fugue pair. Now, fugues were almost always preceded by an improvised prelude in the same key. We talked about this on Monday. Those preludes allow the performer to warm up and test the tuning and fix any tuning issues on the fly. So Bach began the practice of writing out these preludes rather than improvising them. So these were things that would have sounded improvisatory, and yet Bach is taking the leap of notating them and preserving them. So the Well-Tempered Clavier is a set of 2 books. Don't let that fool you. There's book 1 and book 2. And they are sets of prelude and fugue pairs in every major and minor key. That means each book has a total of 24 prelude and fugue pairs. So there are 48 pairs total, 2 books of 24 pairs. Does that make sense to everyone? Thumbs or hands? Okay, good. I see a few thumbs. So the project was explicitly meant to show off advances in keyboard and tuning technology. So let's take a look at just the very first prelude from this set. So like I said, these are pairs. There are 2 movements that go together. And we are just looking at the first movement of the first pair, the prelude to the first fugue. So they go, all of them throughout the book go in order: C major, C minor, C sharp major, C sharp minor, yada, 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 all the way to B minor is the very last set. And we can hear the origins of this type of counterpoint in lute playing. Lutenists, I should say, were the first, and I'm talking previous centuries, to start this prelude practice before performing the piece proper. And so when we take this practice of writing down preludes, we're going to preserve that idiomatic lute writing. Somebody remind me what idiomatic writing is. We've talked about it a few times.
Composing the music that's conducive to how the instrument works.
Absolutely. So these preludes are going to sound conducive to a lute, even though they're being played on a keyboard. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that instead of using scalar runs, which would lay better on a keyboard, really, because you can just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Instead of using those scalar runs, what you have are broken arpeggios. And you can't even block the chords and hold all of the notes down at the same time, because on a lute you would strum, right? You would never hear all the notes at once. You would hear one string after the other. So broken arpeggios are what we call style brisé. And what that means is broken style. So style brisé is lute music, basically, and it's broken arpeggios. And we call keyboard music style brisé whenever it evokes that lute through broken arpeggios. Okay, style brisé, broken arpeggios, evokes the lute. Do we all feel good about what style brisé is? Thumbs or hands? Good. Okay, I see a couple thumbs. Quick check-in. How many of you are actually in the room right now? Can I get a thumb if you are in the room? Okay, it looks like we're missing several. Okay, wait, no, a few more popping in. Okay, so it looks like most of you are in the room, but I saw fewer thumbs comfortable with style brisé. So, to give an example, well, you know what, the Bach is our example of style brisé. Why don't we revisit that after listening? Okay. Now again, this prelude is going to sound improvisatory. It's going to sound as if the performer is merely doing something natural in the moment. Also notice there's pretty much no melody with this. It is all those broken chords. Because you're focused on tuning, you're not focused on a melody. We're not paying attention to the melody. What we are paying attention to is how well tuned the chords are. So what we care about is harmony here, not melody. Harmony over melody. And in fact, when we are analyzing the form of this particular prelude, what we're really analyzing is the harmony. So I'm not looking at a melodic figure. What I'm looking at is, oh, how long do we stay in C major? When do we move to F? When do we move to G? So when do we move through the different functions? Because we have now arrived at functional harmony. Okay, so no melody, we're paying attention to harmony. Let's listen to an example of these broken arpeggios, and this will give you an idea of what we mean by style brisé. Okay, here is the first prelude from the Well-Tempered Clavier. Okay, so we're back to our tonic. We've completed, for lack of a better word, a phrase. So that is style brisé, that's strumming. Now, how many of you feel comfortable with style brisé? Can I get a thumb or a hand? Oh no, fewer people feel comfortable now. Okay, wait. Oh, good, good, good. We're getting some more thumbs in. Okay, so that's style brisé. The question that I want to ask you after listening to that is, what's the appeal here? If there's no melody and there's no embellishments, it's just an improvisatory simple piece to get you ready for the real piece, that is the fugue. What is the purpose of this prelude?
I mean, I feel like it was just said, like it's to kind of set the mood, kind of get people ready for the actual thing. It's like I can imagine like people in like a concert hall or something like gathering around in their seats before the actual concert begins.
Hmm, I like that. I might nuance that and say this is even a more intimate genre than that. So, think back to the early 1700s when we don't have microphones, we don't have these large concert halls. Um, this would just be people kind of gathered around in a salon or a living room. So it's even a very intimate genre. And yes, you are 100% right, Mark, that we've, just got the people gathered around. We can see them settling in, getting ready to listen to some virtuosity during the fugue. Um, let's pick apart that mood though. What kind of mood does this set? Oh, I see something in the chat here. Maybe to solidify. Yes, Addison, solidify the key. There we go. That consonance, that mood. I guess what I want to do is relate Addison's idea of the hammering the key home to Mark's idea of setting the mood. It is meant to establish a tonal system in our ears. It is meant to accustom us to that sonic base. Okay, so it's as much for the listener in this case as it is for the performer, that we are meant to, okay, there's my home key. That's where I'm sonically living. Cool. Anything else we should observe about this? Okay, then let's go on to today's bit. And we're still focusing on instrumental music in the Baroque era. So we're still in the same mode. Okay, there we go. But now we're delving even into the later Baroque. And the later Baroque takes on the extreme. We're taking this idea of ornateness to its extreme. Remember that the word Baroque began as a pejorative for misshapen pearl because of the overdoing, if you will, of embellishment, because it's too elaborate and too fussy. With the late Baroque, we reach the absolute extreme of this misshapenness. So towards the end of the Baroque, we move into something called the Rococo. It's just a fun word to say, but what the Rococo is an extension of the Baroque in the late Baroque era, defined by elegance, refinement, delicacy. And it was originally a term used in painting, architecture, and sculpture. We only apply it to music a little bit later. So it comes from the French word for shell work. Think curvy, glossy, bright seashells, those nature's ornaments, if you will. And I have this picture here of a Rococo salon. Look at all of that scroll work, the detailed curvature. It just looks like things are growing out of the furniture. That is Rococo. And there's this attention to minute detail in both the music and visual arts, signified by good manners and breeding, of course. So this is a class thing as much as it is an artistic thing. You would not find commoners indulging in Rococo art. So this is very much a class thing. And the main characteristics of the Rococo are, of course, increased embellishment of melodies, again, to the point of losing what the melody even is. These striking harmonic progressions, like surprising dissonances that come out of nowhere. Oh, hey, wait, all of a sudden my instruments shift. Think back to Rameau, this idea of setting ambience through sound. this idea that the environment is created by these really surprising sounds around you. Now, because it's hard to pin down the exact musical equivalents when talking about music outside of France, there's lots of debate about what Rococo refers to in terms of sound and what exactly defines the French influence. So this can be a slippery term, but a useful one. If you're in the late Baroque era and you see a lot of embellishment and a lot of surprising harmonies, then you're probably dealing with the Rococo. Now, on the other hand, we have the Galant style, and we call Galant pre-classical music. This is something that almost sounds like Mozart, but not quite. And what defines the Galant in opposition to Rococo is that it's all about mannerism. What do I mean by that? Well, according to Voltaire, the phrase seeking to please was the definition of manners. Manners in all senses of that word, whether, we're talking like table manners or artistic manners. The purpose of manners is to please those around you. So with Galant music, you are trying to make everything as pleasing as possible. In Germany, there's a very similar idea called Empfindsamkeit, which literally means sensitivity. You can also call it the Empfindsamer Stil or the sensitive style. Know that Galant and Empfindsamer Stil are the same thing. It's just that one is the French word and one is the German. The defining feature of the Galant or Empfindsamer Stil is in opposition to, oh yeah, question? Okay, maybe just a mic slip. Oh, cool. The defining feature of this Rococo, or not Rococo, sorry. The defining feature of this Galant or Empfindsamer Stil, in contrast to the Rococo, is restrained melody and a sparse harmonic accompaniment. So these are two opposite extensions in the late Baroque. We see a divergence. On one hand, the Rococo side, some composers are getting more and more and more ornate. On the other hand, some composers are starting to say, let's back off of that a little. Let's return to simplicity for the sake of being pleasant. Let's not overwhelm those around us. Let's not overpower them. Let's please them. So we've got two different reactions to this Baroque idea at the end of the era. Does everyone feel comfortable with the difference between Rococo and Galant? Can I get thumbs or hands on that? Like if I asked you on a test, describe each movement and what it means, would you feel comfortable doing that? Okay, I see a few thumbs, but okay, something in the chat. Okay, Kobe says yes, cautiously. Okay, well, let's talk, because the whole subject of today's class is going to be probing these two styles. So let's give some examples and let's see how this stuff plays out. Maybe that'll make it yes, exclamation point. Okay. Where's my PowerPoint window? Yes, okay. So let's talk about the Rococo first. Well, like I said, it's defined by ornamentation. So I just want to show you a couple different tables of these Rococo embellishments. This first one is by a very famous keyboard teacher, Jean-Henri d'Engelbert. And I want you to notice, well, two things. First of all, the proliferation of ornaments. We don't have this many types of ornaments today, right? We don't have a simple tremolo. We don't have a supported tremolo. We don't have this type of cadence. We don't have this ultra double cadence. Without, I can't even make out the printing there. I don't know, on a third. So we don't have these things today. Look at the proliferation and variety of Rococo embellishments. So on the top line, you see how it would be notated in the music. And on the bottom line, you see exactly how the keyboardist would be expected to play that. So this looks like something like a trill where instead of going to the note above, you're going to the note below. Okay, this looks like a trill with a grace note in front of it. This looks like something we don't do at all today. This, again, something we don't do at all today. This kind of looks like a gruppetto or a turn, but combined with a trill, right? All of these things are things that were common in Rococo music. You couldn't be a keyboardist unless you mastered how to use all of these embellishments or all of these agrements. They would have called them agrements. Similarly, here's Rameau's table. We've encountered Rameau as the opera composer, but remember, he was a theorist. So here's Rameau's table of agrements. So he's showing us, here's how it's notated. Here's how you would play it. Here's how this is notated. Here's how you would play it. So on and so forth, all down the line. Okay. Do we all understand? I guess basically what I'm trying to get you to understand is it's a lot. So including the sheer variety of embellishments, these things get put into the music very frequently. They occur every, if not on every note, then every 2 or 3 notes. So my question for you, and I want to have a real discussion for a few minutes. Have we lost anything in our playing today by not using these?
Honestly, I don't think so. I think like if there are like 800 ways to do a trill, then that kind of distracts from like the melody of the music a little bit, and it's kind of like it feels kind of pretentious. Like we have it's just like, oh, I'm moving my fingers back and forth for literally everything, and even though it doesn't really add anything to the musical like movement or arc or anything, like, a trill for a conclusion to, like, make the fermata a little bit more interesting, something like that, like, sure. But if it's happening all the time, it kind of loses its meaning.
Yes. And I wanna point out too something you especially said. In this case, the focus then goes to the performer, right? Because we're paying more attention to what the performer is doing than to what the music is saying, or for that matter, what the composer is saying. And that is very much a part of the French Rococo style, that we are focused on the person executing the thing more than we are the thing itself. Excellent points. Anyone else want to take an opposite view or a similar view, but for different reasons? Autumn, yeah, pick it apart. Well, do you agree for the same reasons that Mark said, or is there something else that's on your mind?
I agree with everything Mark said.
Fair enough.
I
Mark
think
did.
it's a little bit like pretentious and it focuses on the player. That's exactly what I was thinking.
I like that you both use the word pretentious too, because pretentious usually means overly fixated on manners, right? You're hung up on pretense. In other words, social protocol.
I was thinking of it in the sense like they're trying to make whatever it is they're playing sound more than what it actually is.
Okay, so you're dealing with not much substance, but elitist. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. So these are equally valid points. This is why I love discussion. Yeah, you're dealing with something that's not much substance, but you're trying to make it sound more impressive. Let's keep that in our mind. For those of you taking music history 2 next semester, please keep that debate in your mind for when we talk about Chopin and Liszt. Okay, well, without further ado then, let's actually listen to some of this Rococo stuff. Okay, perfect example of this is the music of Francois Couperin. And he was a keyboard composer at the French court. So again, very courtly. This is a class, this is an elitist thing as much as it is an artistic thing. And he composed pretty exclusively keyboard music. What we have here is what we call an order. That's basically just the French word for a dance suite. We talked about dance suites before. We talked last Monday specifically. We talked about how we have to have a particular order of dances, how we have to have a contrasting pairs of dances. So what we're dealing with is just a French dance suite. That's what an order is. Notice that all dances are in binary form. I'm going to say that again because this should be in your notes and this should be a fact in your head that you leave with. All dances are in binary form. All dances are in binary form. Just so we're all on the same page, can someone remind me what binary form is?
Is it AABB?
Oh, wait, we had a couple people crossing there. I heard the word 2 and I heard AB. Is that?
I was gonna say AABB.
Oh, okay. Yes. So in reality, we have 2 sections and each of them are repeated. Addison, what you are pointing out could be a couple things. It could either be rounded binary or lyric binary. If we return to the A section, then that would be something slightly different. Binary form in its purest sense is just A, B. Now, we generally, with these dance movements, repeat each section. So what ends up happening in practice is not only A, B, but A, B, B. So because I have 2 sections and each of them are repeated, I've got that expansion there. And all dances are in binary form. All dances have an A section and a B section. Good. So this would also be played specifically on a harpsichord. Out of all other keyboard instruments, the French focused on the harpsichord. And after we talk about this piece, I'm going to talk about the different types of keyboards that were out there. But the harpsichord dominated in France because of the texture of these French Rococo compositions. The harpsichord lent itself really well to these agréments, to these overly ornate melodies that would you would just have a proliferation of a lot of notes in a short time, and the harpsichord lent itself really well to that. Now, this particular order, so dance suite, is a piece of program music. Somebody remind me what program music is.
Is it like when it's all built around like a whole show?
Not even a whole show, but you've got the right idea. It's built around some kind of story, yes, some kind of text. So whether it's an entire show, it could be an entire show, whether it's that or whether it's something as simple as the program, the title, then that's program music. If there's some kind of text, some kind of story associated with it. And this particular order is program music. We have titles that evoke different bird songs in each movement. So in this movement, we have the nightingale in love. So it's bird song, it's a mating song for a nightingale. And because it is program music, we can also refer to this as a character piece. So we mentioned character pieces as being that really slippery, vague term. Doesn't tell us too much. It just tells us that there's a program associated with the music. And that is what we have here. After the actual dance, we have what we called a double, a double. Literally, it means double. What it is an ornamented repeat of the dance. So you play the dance through once, straight through. Then you play the dance again with these, gosh, all of these agréments over it. And you can see in your score, if you look in your anthology, you see there's just little dots all over the place telling you how many notes to add. And Couperin was really strict about his agréments. He would be a finicky fuddy-duddy about people trying to improvise or add things on their own. He didn't like that because he wanted to tell you exactly what should go in the music. So let's listen to the original dance. Let's listen to the double. And then what I want to ask you is, relating back to that question about embellishments, is it worth it? Are these embellishments worth it? Okay, here's the original dance. Here's our B section. Sorry, here's our B section. That was a repeat of the A. I misspoke. Here's our B. Okay, so we made it through both A sections and a B section. Let's hear the double to compare. here's our repeat of the A. C section. Okay. Is it worth it? Miss notes. Yeah, no. Perla, you would be in agreement with a lot of thinkers in that time period. It's yes, I don't know what to say beyond that. Is not a hot take. You would be in agreement with many thinkers then. Same thing with Maya's observation that yeah, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. Mark, excellent point. You couldn't dance to this if you tried, right? We've lost, well, I don't want to say lost, that sounds negative. But we have left behind the original function of the dance. People would not have tried to dance to this. They would have sat and listened with the awareness that it's kind of based on a dance. Yeah. Make of that what you will. Is that a good thing or a bad thing that we're no longer dancing to dance music? Any other reactions? Okay, so that is Rococo music. That is the heart of this Mannerist style. Good. So let's talk about, I promise we're going to talk about the different types of keyboards that are available to Baroque musicians. Well, first of all, we can play what we call the virginals. And that is an early type of harpsichord. So it's similar in mechanics, not necessarily as strong or technologically advanced. Now, this is a specifically English instrument. And the source of the name, we can debate it. It can be because it was popular under Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen. It could be because the way the rod was arranged, it made a specific shape. And a period was known as a virga. So virginal would be like the shape of the rod. It's a go-go. I mean, again, 1700s thinkers would not necessarily disagree with you. But yeah, so it could be the shape of the rod. Honestly, the most likely source of the virginal, the name virginals, is that it was played by young women. If you were a young woman, you were expected to have mastered and be an accomplished performer on this instrument. Now, in the virginal, there's a single string for each pitch. So in our modern piano, we have what, 3 strings for each key. In the virginal, there's only 1 string. So again, it's a much thinner sound. And these strings run perpendicular to the keys rather than parallel with them on a harpsichord. So we saw a harpsichord. I had a picture of it somewhere. Oh, maybe it was in the last PowerPoint. Never mind. But you've seen harpsichords on my PowerPoints. And you've seen how, much like a grand piano, the keys just go straight back. So in a virginal, they go perpendicular. So here's my keyboard. My strings are laying across that way. Another thing that distinguishes the virginal is that it's got two bridges in there. So it's got two pieces of wood that the strings rest on. That also thins out the sound and distinguishes it from a harpsichord. Another keyboard option that we have is the spinet. And this is an Italian word, possibly named after the inventor Giovanni Spinetti, also possibly for the shape of the spine. So again, the name origin is debatable. You don't have to actually know the name origin, but the biggest qualifier and what should make you recognize a spinet is the angle of the keys. So I have a little video you can play around with when you have time to download the PowerPoint and watch it. But even without the video, notice, here's my keyboardist. Look at the strings and the weird angle they come in at on the spinet. We call that an oblique angle. And the spinet is unique among keyboards for having that oblique angle. Okay. On, come on. There we go. On the other hand, this is a specifically French type of keyboard, a clavichord. What distinguishes a clavichord is it's got a double set of strings. So now we have two strings for each pitch. But what we really have is if you guys remember the monochord with Pythagoras, where we had a single string and we would pluck the string at different points to create different notes, that's really what's happening in the clavichord. It's like there are frets in there, and the tangents or mallets will hit on different frets of the same string. So, in the chat, he kind of is in a less new wave way. Let's call this old wave. So, yeah, it's basically, if you look inside of it, it looks a lot like the neck, or the fretboard, I should say, of a plucked string instrument. Extra vintage. Yes, it was a good year. And yeah, these were originally just a series of monochords, basically, in a box, where the keys have to hit each chord at the right point to make the right sound. I've put another little video in the PowerPoint for you, so you can check it out at your leisure. But finally, the last keyboard instrument that I want to draw your attention to is the organ. Notice these organs are much bigger than any of the organs we've talked about thus far. We've got, I wish there were a human in this picture for scale, but this is many, many, many times the size of the human body. So these organs are much bigger than any of the organs we talked about in the Renaissance or Middle Ages. They've got multiple manuals, so multiple keyboards. They are the loudest type of string because, you know, you're consistently pushing air through those pipes. And organs have much more timbral variety at this point because they have varieties of stops. In other words, do I have any organ players in the room? No? Okay. So for anyone who's not familiar with an organ, you can change the sound it makes by pushing and pulling little buttons called stops on the organ. And each stop, okay, go ahead. You can probably word this better than I could. How do stops work? You push and pull little buttons and yes. So basically what happens is you're changing the timbre by changing the pipe that the air comes out of. And you can have it come out of multiple pipes at once. That's why when someone says they're pulling out all the stops, they're using all the pipes. They're coming at you full force. And yeah, there are different types. We've got reed stops. We've got brass stops that imitate brass instruments. We've got, depending on how technologically complex your organ is, you have possibly hundreds to choose from. So the organ is the most diverse and the most flexible of all Baroque keyboard instruments. So those are the machines that we have out there to make this kind of music. I want to talk for just a few minutes too about the different types of dances that would be available for composers to work with. Now, these are all social dances. What do I mean by that? Dances that are performed by whole groups of people. It's not just, think of it like going to a club and everybody is just kind of out on the floor together, okay? It's not sitting back and watching just a very few featured performers. It's everybody out on the floor getting down. So a few of these dance types that we have to work with are the Galliard. So that's a triple meter dance. It's very athletic. It requires 4 leaps and a long step. You don't have to know that part. It goes in 6-beat patterns. So it's a triple meter dance, but you'll find that the melodic figures span 6 beats in modern notation. So common meters for this would be 3/4, 3/2, or 6/4. Anything where we can have 2 groups of 3 together. And this is a very courtly dance. So this would have been the purview of those, rich elitists. Then we have the allemande. Remember, the allemande is the first movement of those partitas that we see. The allemande usually kicks us off for those partitas. This would be a dance in common time. It's got long flowing steps. It's a slow and stately dance in contrast to that very athletic Galliard. This is something that the grandmas and grandpas could do. And it was also a courtly dance. The grandmas and grandpas would probably sit down for the courante. That word literally means running in French. So it is also a triple meter dance. Now it's a series, instead of those large steps of the Galliard, like when you're leaping around in a Galliard, a courante is all about quick glides and hops. So you're not traveling far, you're just boop, boop. And the music reflects those quick glides and hops by employing a lot of scalar runs. In a courante, you will see a lot of scalar runs, also because courante means run. So it's a fast dance, usually in 3/2 or 6/4 in the French version. In the Italian version, it would be 3/4 or 3/8. Notice that in either case, it's that very quick triple meter. In contrast to the first 2 dances that we talked about, the courante is a folk dance. This is something that originated not among those elitists, but among the common people. So the common people would be doing these really like fast, exuberant dances, and the courtly people were imitating them. We also have a passamezzo, which is another slow, stately, it's a processional, basically. And it's in duple meter. It's slow, like a pavane. And it also originated among the common folk. It's a very heavy dance. And what distinguishes the passamezzo is the chord progressions we use. Now, I don't need you to memorize the chord progressions, but I do want you to know that there are 2 types of passamezzo. There's the passamezzo antico or old, and the passamezzo moderno, modern or new. So those are two different chord progressions, and those chord progressions are what make a passamezzo a passamezzo. So again, very contrasting to those more exuberant dances that we began with. Just a few more kinds. We have a saltarello. That's another triple meter fast dance. It's related to the Galliard. The saltarello and Galliard are very similar. Like the Galliard, this is a courtly dance. We also have a pavon. A pavon and a passamezzo are very similar. This is another processional dance. And in fact, pavon means peacock because you are peacocking. You're showing off your feathers. You're walking around wanting people to look at you. But whereas the passamezzo was a folk procession, it was common people walking around. A pavon is courtly. So this would be those elite aristocrats wandering around showing off their finery. This would also be in duple meter, balanced sections, and a very heavy, let's say. We have a Branle or Bransel, depending on what country you're in. Ooh. All good, Nathan? No, you're good. As long as it's not a question, I'm happy.
Audio never mind.
No, you're good. You're good. I just want to make sure I wasn't throwing too much information out. So there's a Branle or Bransel, which is a kind of aristocratic line dance. So you don't have a partner in a Branle, you have a group. It's like literally line dancing. And the whole idea is that the chain of people have to like take alternating steps to the right and left. And what's cool about the Branle is it can occur at any tempo. So unlike those previous dances that we talked about that have very strict rules about being fast or slow, the Branle, it could be any speed that you want, but it will always be in 4/4 time. And finally, the last dance that I will throw at you today is the Volta. Now, this was scandalous. This was like the Dirty Dancing of its day, because couples actually embraced to perform the Volta. You didn't just, if you were doing those other dances that we've talked about, you might hold hands and you might walk next to each other, but you weren't like actually touching per se. No, I know. Can you guys believe these heathen children today? The youths, these degenerate hooligans. But they actually had to embrace. Why? Because Volta means turn. So the man had to lift up the woman to turn. Like it was a whole thing, like the leap was the defining feature. And to do the leap, they had to hold each other. And yeah, oh my gosh, can you imagine? Society today is crumbling, but this would also be a dance in 3/4 time. So I know that's a lot of information thrown at you all at once, but does everybody feel okay with this list of dances? Okay, I see two people, 3 people. Okay. Let me also assure you, I'm not going to like ask you to memorize these and list them out. Why I'm giving you these is so that when you play this music, you will be able to identify the music or the type of dance that you're playing. And that should inform the way you interpret a piece of music. If you're playing a Galliard, you should interpret a Galliard different from a pavon. If you're playing a pavon, you should interpret it differently from a Volta. So I'm not giving you this list to memorize encyclopedically. What I'm giving you is a framework for your own playing. Does that make sense? Okay, I'll 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 take the lack of hands as some kind of confidence. Good. So, like I said, we're dealing in this late Baroque with a conflict of aesthetics. And I mentioned this last time when we talked about Bach. There's this kind of conflict between a French style and an Italian style. And a few composers are known for being able to bridge that gap. One of them was Francois Couperin. But the composer that we really associate with combining French and Italian influences is J.S. Bach. This ability to combine was a defining trait of J.S. Bach's music. And we call this combination les goûts réunis, the tastes reunited. Again, that is not my phrase. That is a phrase that the wider world uses. And we specifically see this ability in Bach's dance suites. He's using these French Rococo dance rhythms and this Italian virtuosity and elaborate phrase structure. So he's combining the rhythmic drive of the French with the phrase structure of the Italians. And what I mean by phrase structure is he's incorporating things like sequences, cadential extensions, where you have like a lot of codettas that harp on the key over and over again, and motivic unity, where he's taking a little kernel of a motive and then elaborating on it, changing it around, incorporating it in other voices. So this phrase structure that comes to us from Italian composers, combined with Rococo dance rhythms, is going to be a defining feature of Les Goûts Réunis, and Bach is a non-parial composer in that idiom. So let's listen to a little bit of Bach. And here, I want to hammer home, in contrast to the Rococo, this idea of the galant. Notice this French suite of Bach's is composed in the same year that Couperin's working. These two pieces that I'm going to play you, well, one of them I've already played you. These two pieces are in the exact same time period, but they're wholly different. What Couperin is that Rococo par excellence. Bach is going to do something much more galant. I want to emphasize that even though we call these French suites, there's nothing inherently French about them. Yeah, that's kind of just a nomenclature that's been adopted over the years. Bach himself did not call them French. That was not a term Bach would have used. But in the century since, they've been called French suites, and it's kind of, we're not sure why. Like I said, this is style galant, the galant style, in contrast to Rococo. I said that Voltaire defined manners as, the ability to please. Well, the verb, galère in French means to amuse. So again, to please everyone around you, you're trying to make something that everyone around you will enjoy. The way that Bach does this is by emphasizing clarity, simplicity. And there's one specific gesture that is associated with style galant that we see a lot of in this allemande. That is stepwise ascents and descents. Why? Because it's really simple just to go up or down a few steps of a scale. You can't find a more straightforward melodic move than that. Just go up a few steps or go down a few steps. And that is as simple and straightforward and plain as you can get. So that stepwise motion is a defining feature of the style galant. Like all dances, this allemande is in binary form. The A section is going to move us from the tonic to the dominant, and the B section is going to move us from the dominant back to the tonic. So again, in the era of functional harmony, you've got this trajectory of increasing tension back to the point of release. Tension, release, tension, release. So A section is building tension by moving to the dominant. B section releases it by moving back to the tonic. And that is the basis of functional harmony. This, much like the prelude from the Well-Tempered Clavier that we heard, much like that prelude, employs the stile brisé. Somebody remind me what stile brisé is. I know you all have a memory of like at least an hour.
The broken style in arpeggiated chords.
Precisely, broken arpeggios, broken style. So we see a lot of that specifically in the left hand of this allemande. So I'm going to play this.
Just to clarify, that was like when we listened to the thing that was like do 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 do, that little thing we listened to.
Precisely. That was that prelude, and because those preludes began on lutes, Bach was continuing that kind of lute strumming in his prelude. So perfect example. Okay, so I'm going to play a little bit of this allemande. And the question that I have for you is, I'm going to ask a really loaded question, and I regret nothing. Is this better than the Couperin or not? We complained about the Couperin a little bit ago. Is this better or not? Okay, we got through our two A sections, the A and the repeat. This is how you should, elaborate, Mark. What makes these trills to you more pleasing than those Couperin Algréments?
So a couple things. One is that they're used a lot more sparingly. Like they're given more emphasis by not being as common. And the second is that like it feels like more intentionally subdivided so that each trill actually fits into the beat instead of trying to interrupt the flow.
Yes. Yeah, I have nothing to add to that because this is subjective. This is my own personal opinion, but I agree. And good. Jared says it's more interesting. Unpack that for us, Jared. What holds your interest here? Okay, more dynamic ooh, okay, now. Here's something that I want you guys to keep in mind too, is this would have originally been performed on a harpsichord, right? Or a clavichord, one of those two. And our modern pianos are so very different. And there's a huge debate that rages among performers about whether it's appropriate to play this stuff on a modern piano or not. And one of the points in favor of playing it on a modern instrument is that we have greater ability to control dynamics on this modern stuff. So yeah, if it's dynamic contrast that attracts you, then it's worth performing this on a piano. Good, and I see a couple more things in the chat. Okay, Perla says much more connected. Yeah, keep going, Perla. What do we feel is connected about it?
I just like think that like what can you guys hear me fine? Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Like I don't know, listening to it, it just seemed as if like it was like a piece altogether, unlike the other song where it was kind of like it seemed more kind of like stopped playing just because of the trills, and then this definitely like connected each note and each phrase together much more better compared to the last one.
Yeah, let's go back to that idea of motivic unity in Bach. So 100%, I would agree. He's taking these motives that he's made us familiar with and then elaborating on them throughout. Whereas Couperin he was just putting motives together, motives on top of motives on top of motives. Whereas Bach is playing around with these things that become familiar to us. Okay, Autumn says trills make more sense. Yes. And Autumn, I think we can relate that back to what Mark said about, they don't interrupt the phrase, they contribute to key points of the phrase. Yeah. Anything else that anyone wants to point out about this?
Yeah, I was gonna say I actually completely agree with what everyone said so far, but I also think that it does sacrifice some aspects of the music. For example, like the chord progression seems like it gets lost. Like it's actually hard to hear like what chords it's moving to because it doesn't stay. It just arpeggiates, but immediately changes to something else. So it's like I feel like in the first piece, it does a crazy trill, but then it ends on a note that is like it's home base for that chord, and then it moves on. Whereas the Bach goes so fast that I can't even tell what chord it's on at any given time.
Yes, I hate trying to do chordal analysis on Bach pieces because it's like okay, this beat and then this beat and then this beat. But I'm going to connect two important thoughts there, Nathan. So first is French music in general and this is true throughout the centuries. This is not just a Baroque thing. French musicians very much love holding on to harmony and timbre. Germans, on the other hand, they love experimenting with harmony. Think Wagner 2 centuries after this. Like, no, not a century and a half after this, where, it's all about adding dissonance and experimenting with what chords are possible. So the French love pleasant harmonies and sonic, they love sitting there in sonic peace. And that is exactly what Couperin is doing. The other thing, oh yeah, Sam?
Oh, sorry, no, my computer was just dying, so I just had to join on my phone.
Gotcha. Trust me, I sympathize with that, especially today. The other thing is that, yes, because this would have been performed on harpsichord, the harmonic reality is very different for us. We experience this very differently when we hear it on pianos. And I desperately tried to find harpsichord recordings of this, but I'll be darned if I could find them on Spotify. It's all pianos out there. It's pianos all the way down. And so 100% we would experience that harmony differently if we were experiencing it on harpsichord. Okay. Anybody else have any other reactions? Okay, then in that case, y'all are free. Have a beautiful weekend. I look forward to seeing you on Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Addison. Rachel, y'all good? Oh.